forget.
You look up there and you don't see the World Trade Center. It's unbelievable.
The images, the sounds, etched in our collective memory forever.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York.
We look back. Those caught in the horror.
People said, run for your life. The building's collapsing.
The lives left behind.
I think you guys are out there. Please, please just hang in.
And the true faces of courage.
You wish you could do more. You wish you were Superman.
Every once in a while, we all break down, but we pull ourselves together and get back in there.
From out of the rubble, what's happening there now?
Everything will have to be leveled.
Along with a rare glimpse underneath Ground Zero. The city beneath the city you haven't seen.
About 5 floors, over 70 feet of floor, compacted down to about 3 feet.
And beyond, a look to the future. Should they rebuild? What should stand on this now hallowed site?
Something ought to be done there to commemorate the loss, but look to the future.
We're not only going to rebuild, we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before.
In this hour, it was more than a skyline that changed.
It really touches you. It gives you a lump in your throat.
Come with us. Back to Ground Zero.
September 11th. Just mention the two words together, and images and memories instantly return. With the wound it caused to the nation's psyche so fresh, it's hard to believe it all happened 3 months ago. And as the war that began that day, the war against terrorism continues, we're going to step back and look at September 11th again and what's happened since then at the place they call the site. To begin, MSNBC's Lester Holt takes us back to the moments the World Trade Center became Ground Zero.
September 11th, 2001. It's a crisp, clear morning in the Northeast. The day gets started in the ordinary way. In Boston, this Boeing 767 takes off for Los Angeles at 7:59 a.m. It's American Airlines Flight 11 with 81 passengers and 11 crew. In New York, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani is already on the job.
I was at the Peninsula Hotel in Midtown Manhattan finishing a breakfast. And I was leaving to go down to City Hall.
Back up in the sky, Flight 11 takes a sharp left turn. It heads south in the direction of New York. Controllers have no idea why yet. The controllers notify the military and quickly try to shut down all air traffic in the area. They watch the radar screen in stunned silence as the jet approaches Manhattan. A few minutes later, the plane disappears from radar.
It's the biggest ball of fire. It looked like a sunset over the beach in Florida. It was that large.
Ron Scott is a 44-year-old manager working for Metropolitan Life on the 81st floor of the other tower.
I heard windows shattering floor after floor after floor above, and it was only seconds after the crash. And I heard coming down the side of our building.
Back uptown, an aide pulls the mayor aside.
It said that the World Trade Center, there was a fire at the World Trade Center, that they thought it was a twin-engine airplane that had hit the top of the World Trade Center. And we said goodbye, and I said to the police officers, we got to head down there, get as much information as you can.
Mayor Giuliani and his top staff members race straight down Fifth Avenue.
As we were driving down, and for the first time saw the World Trade Center, and I could see the smoke and flames coming out of it, the top. But I still couldn't tell how bad it was.
As workers rush from the building, many use cell phones to call loved ones. Melissa Hughes is forced to leave a message for her husband.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. A plane hit the building or a bomb went off. We don't know, but there's lots of smoke, and we just wanted you to know that I love you always.
Firefighters rush to the scene. New York's bravest push their way up the stairs, past those trying to get out, hoping to save the lives of those above. Others, desperate, hang from windows, and some fall or jump to certain death.
We see people jumping out the window. People hanging out the window, jumping, holding hands and jumping.
In the neighboring South Tower, people are also evacuating. But an announcement over the PA system tells workers their building is secure and they can return to their desks. An announcement that will soon have tragic consequences.
But the evacuation effort from Lower Manhattan.
The mayor approaches ground zero.
At that point, we got a little bit closer. You could see how much worse it was, and then a tremendous explosion took place.
18 minutes after the first impact, at 9:03, Americans watch in horror as Flight 175 hits the second tower.
Holy shit!
An explosion, and the South Tower is now in flames.
A second airplane just ran into the building.
I've never seen anything like it. It literally blew itself into World Trade Center.
We were notified very quickly that a second plane had hit the other tower, and then we obviously knew it was terrorism. Obviously, we weren't going to have two airplanes that did this.
The ball of fire that came flying out of that one was even worse than the first one.
I could see the top of the World Trade Center, Tower number 1, I think this is the first time I realized that this was something beyond anything we've ever experienced before.
Something else just hit, a very large...
By the time the second plane hit, I was at the other side of the law firm.
Up on the 81st floor, Ron Scott leads fellow employees down the emergency stairs.
It was touch and go for about 4 or 5 floors, step after step. People were falling. People were banging their heads and their shoulders against the steel railings and against the solid concrete walls.
As panic hits downtown New York, all access, bridges, tunnels, and airports are closed. The awful truth settles in. America is under attack.
At this point, although it was a terrorist incident, I think we were still treating it the way we treat a rescue or a fire.
Everyone in the city should remain calm. The very best thing to do right now would be to remain home.
Yes. President Bush, visiting a grade school in Sarasota, Florida, gets the whispered message that a second plane has hit the World Trade Towers. He makes a quick statement before cutting his visit short.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The scope, unbelievable, and about to get worse.
A few moments ago, there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon.
9:39 a.m. The explosion is of a third airliner, American Airlines Flight 77, with 64 people on board as it slams into its target, the very nerve center of U.S. military operations, the Pentagon.
We were pretty certain at this point there were going to be more targets. If they had hit two World Trade Center buildings in New York City, they had hit the Pentagon already. Then what was next?
As military and civilian personnel rush from the building, America goes on the highest alert. The Pentagon, White House, Capitol, and other state and federal buildings are all evacuated. Soon followed by a mandate from the Federal Aviation Administration. All planes in the United States are grounded. An estimated 50,000 people work in the World Trade Center complex, and most would be heading to their offices about this time. A video camera in a nearby building shows the chaos and panic as people fight to escape the horror.
Potentially there were 25,000, 30,000 people that were in all those different buildings. And they evacuated probably about 25,000 of them in an orderly way.
The luckiest have already escaped the buildings. Tens of thousands flee Lower Manhattan. But no one can imagine the catastrophe still to come.
Coming next.
It was all white. It was like clouds.
Moment by moment. The terror up close. Back to Ground Zero continues on MSNBC.
"9:55 a.m. 2 planes have hit the World Trade Center, leaving the Twin Towers in flames and America in shock. High inside the South Tower, insurance manager Ron Scott is leading co-workers down the treacherous stairwell.
Sure enough, 6 more floors. We met a lot of very young firefighters who didn't look more than about 25, 26, 28. And when we stopped to talk to them, they said, have you seen anybody else? We said, no, we're pretty much it. Coming down the building, but you've got to get up to floor 76. You've got to save those people. They said, go on, get out of here. We made it from 76 to 70, all the way down to floor 7. We just said, that's it. We've got to make a run for it. And we literally ran down next 7 flights. And what we saw in the lobby was something out of Desert Storm, just mounds and moguls and gray soot and silt. Immediately, instantaneously, I noticed 2 things. The silence, the deafening silence, and light.
That silence is about to be shattered. Mayor Giuliani is 2 blocks away from the Twin Towers.
The building started to shake, and you could hear the building being pelted with something. And then there was first dark outside, because we could see right outside. We were on the first floor.
Suddenly, the tragedy takes on a new dimension when the New York skyline changes forever. Its steel core weakened by the plane's impact and the searing fire, the South Tower, 110 stories and 1,300 feet high, fumbles to the ground.
When the airplane struck the North Tower, it removed about 2/3 of the columns on the north face of the tower.
Leslie Robertson was the structural engineer during the Twin Towers construction.
And similarly, when the plane came in from the south, it removed approximately 2/3 of the columns on the south face of the tower. But what else happened? The engines from those airplanes went into the building, removing structures it went through. Undoubtedly, many of the inner columns inside of the services core, around elevators and stairs and so forth, were destroyed.
The South Tower remained standing for 56 minutes after impact. The collapse leaves about 300 rescue workers missing, presumed trapped in the rubble.
There was no visual. Everything was just white cloud of smoke. Couldn't see anything.
It was all white. It was like clouds going back and forth. Something like when you grew up, when the era I grew up in, you would think a nuclear attack was like. Just this cloud. Very, very massive, heavy white smoke.
While people desperately try to escape Manhattan, yet another drama is unfolding in the sky over Pennsylvania. Passengers on board United Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco are calling their families, saying the plane has been taken over by 3 men armed with makeshift knives, claiming to have a bomb. The hijackers have already stabbed at least 1 person to death, and some passengers, after learning about events at the World Trade Center, are devising a plan. Among them, Mark Bingham, Todd Beamer, Jeremy Glick, and Thomas Burnett.
I have no doubt that he had formulated a plan to get the hijackers out of the cockpit and get home.
The plane has changed direction over Ohio and is headed toward Washington when it crashes 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Authorities will later say they believe the passengers' brave actions prevented the hijackers from reaching a 4th populated target.
My guess is, speculation, that target probably would have been the Capitol building.
Back in Manhattan, what had seemed unthinkable before happens again.
After the first tower collapse, we were back in there trying to bring people out. We knew the second one was about to come down, but we were lifting 1 person, and when it came down, we all just ran for our lives.
Somebody from the fire department said, get out of here, get out of here. The building, was starting to shake and come down. People said, run for your life, the building's collapsing. As I started to run, I looked around at the same time, didn't even stand still, and I saw the TV antenna and the top floor in flames, which was one of our floors, just start coming down, just like a deck of cards. Then when the black cloud hit, about a block away, hit the ground, I just had the presence of mind to keep running, and I pulled my suit jacket over my head, kept looking at my feet, running as fast as I could. And we got to the end of the World Financial Center, along the water, and I saw the water, and I just took my jacket up and looked back, and by now there was nothing left of my building, One World Trade Center. It was just a huge cloud. It was almost like the mushroom cloud in Hiroshima.
There is no way that I felt those towers would ever fall and collapse the way they did. Just not possible.
Guy Tozzoli was the director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey when it built the World Trade Center.
The fuel, it just melted the steel. And once it collapsed those floors between the elevator core and the outside wall, the building imploded.
At a press conference, Mayor Giuliani refuses to speculate on the carnage.
The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear, ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
With a massive rescue effort underway and military fighter jets patrolling overhead, authorities uncover what they call credible evidence of 2 more terrorist targets, the White House and the presidential plane, Air Force One. In New York, hours after the attacks first happened, the effects aren't over. At 5:21 p.m., World Trade Center building number 7, heavily damaged in the morning, also comes crashing down.
Because we have... Oh my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
In the early evening, President Bush returns to Washington to discuss a military response with his advisors and address the nation.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice.
Rescue workers work through the night in both New York and Washington, removing rubble and searching for survivors.
Next, a shocked, grieving nation begins a horrible task.
Every once in a while, we all break down, but we pull ourselves together and get back in there.
When Back to Ground Zero continues on MSNBC.
Look up there and you don't see the World Trade Center. It's unbelievable.
In Lower Manhattan, rescue efforts are proceeding cautiously. Workers using their hands to sift through tons of debris. Hopes high that there could be survivors below. Relatives show pictures and plead for information.
It's my only hope. I mean, obviously people might look at it as futile, but what else think that they won't let me dig.
I think you guys are out there. Please just hang in.
Across the country, Americans unite in an overwhelming response. People line up for hours to give blood and make donations. American flags spring up everywhere, selling faster than they can be sewn. In England, for the first time, the American national anthem is played at the changing of the guard. And in Russia, a moment of silence. But in New York, frustration.
You're doing a lot of work and it seems very, almost no return, you know, like, just really hard.
And to a country clamoring for any sign of hope comes disappointing news. Rescuers still have had no contact with anyone inside the debris. President Bush flies to New York to see the destruction up close for the first time. He tours the site. An arm around a rescue worker delivers a rousing message of determination and inspiration.
Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
A needed boost for exhausted workers and families, still hoping for miracles. Candles become a symbol of America's shared loss and anguish. The president authorizes 50,000 National Guard and reservists to be called up, and Congress passes a $40 billion emergency spending bill to help victims. In lower Manhattan, grateful New Yorkers line the streets, cheering rescue workers. The grisly task of retrieving the dead continues.
It hasn't really hit yet. You know, every once in a while we all break down, you know, from time to time, but you know, we pull ourselves together and get back in there and, you know, just thank God that we get home to our families at night and, you know, give our kids an extra hug and a kiss before we go to bed at night.
Families of the missing are asked to provide DNA samples to help with identification, and others begin to say goodbye. The first aerial pictures from Ground Zero give a new, stunning perspective on the destruction.
You wish you could do more. You wish you were Superman. You wish you could pick up that I-beam and move it and go down deeper. And some things you just can't do.
This is my apartment on the second floor. As you can see, the pretty big windows, and they swivel to the side. They're about 5 foot by 5 foot, and they were both open.
Photographer Cheryl Dunn returns to her apartment 1 block east of the Twin Towers, and the debris is everywhere.
This stuff does not belong to me. A lot of burnt papers.
No new rescues, and Mayor Giuliani tries to prepare those hardest hit, already emotionally fragile, for the worst.
It is much less realistic now, and the chances of recovering any significant number of people there are no chances of recovering significant numbers of people.
October 7th, almost a month since the worst enemy attack on U.S. soil. At 12:26 p.m. on the east coast of the U.S., 8:56 p.m. in Afghanistan, it begins under the cover of darkness. The attack is shown in Department of Defense video.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
The U.S. troops leave no question as to their loyalty and motivation. Back at Ground Zero, the horrible task of clearing the site continues, just as it has every day since September 11th.
Coming next, out of the rubble, a staggering round-the-clock job.
That's our skyline now. Instead of the buildings being there, they're here. It's nuts.
When Back to Ground Zero continues on MSNBC.
Within minutes after the assault on the World Trade Center, thousands of police, firemen, and medical personnel descended on the site to aid in rescue and recovery. Many lost their lives in the attempt. And since those first days, engineers, steel workers, and volunteers have been working around the clock to remove the 1 million tons of wreckage that remained of the 110-story towers and the surrounding buildings that for 30 years dominated the southern tip of Manhattan Island. December 23rd, 1970. One of the proudest moments in New York City history. The topping out ceremony for the North Tower of the World Trade Center. September 11th, 2001. The North Tower is the first hit in the terrorist attack on New York. More than 8 million square feet of office space will plunge to the ground in an avalanche of steel, glass, and concrete. The falling wreckage pushes through the 7 stories beneath street level into the New York City subway system. What took 7 years to build takes less than 2 hours to come crashing down. The Twin Towers, once the world's tallest buildings, become the world's biggest pile of debris.
It's a lot of trucks, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. See the crane with the basket?
That big piece of metal in it is a staircase. That's where they're finding a lot of people and a lot of firemen. They were all coming down the stairs when it collapsed.
Each day, hundreds of workers and volunteers remove about 10,000 tons from the million-ton pile of wreckage, with more to come.
Everything will have to be leveled. There will be nothing left except some of the below-grade construction will be left. But all of that which people think of when they say World Trade Center, all of those buildings, all 7 of them will be gone completely.
Richard Tomasetti's structural engineering firm was commissioned by the city to assess the damage and to assist in removing the debris.
We wound up putting cranes where cranes were never meant to go. The plaza is designed just for people walking on it, and we put a 600-ton crane there by developing a big steel grillage spanning between columns. There's a bridge in one area that's a combination of new structure and old structure to get cranes in certain areas. Some of them have been actually built using the wreckage steel from the World Trade Center.
My father was in this business, and when I was a kid, he took me down here on a smaller crane. And I remember looking up at the towers being built at the time. I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, and I knew then that this is what I wanted to do. And it's so hard to sit here looking at this mess. It really is a tragedy.
But until the removal is complete, workers at Ground Zero continue to move piles of rubble into an endless parade of dump trucks. The trucks haul the debris and steel to Weeks Marine at 2 waterfront sites in Lower Manhattan. Cranes capable of moving more than 50 tons a load get the debris onto the barges.
We're averaging between 5,000 and 6,000 tons a day between the 2 sites.
Marty Corcoran is the operation manager. He arrived on site soon after the attacks.
I guess this is what war looks like. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I've never seen anything quite like it in my life.
Once the refuse is on the barges, it is sent to locations around New York Harbor. Captain Scott Murray runs a small tug, perfect for the tight fit of New York Harbor.
This is a 62-foot, 1,000 horsepower tugboat. You know, it's real good for this type of work that we're doing with these smaller scows, harbor work.
Murray has been in this line of work for 25 years, but this job hits home.
One of the things I've always loved about working in New York Harbor is working around Lower Manhattan here and the East River and this view of Lower Manhattan and the skyline. So now, every time I look over there and see that without the World Trade Center in it, it's like being kicked in the stomach.
Today, Murray is making runs across the East River. Pier 6 in Brooklyn is a staging point. Murray drops off 1 full barge here, picks up an empty one, and returns to Manhattan for more loads. From there, the full barges are toted off to Fresh Kills landfill and recycling plants in New Jersey.
The amount of this stuff, and I know you've been looking at, see, look at that. That's 4-inch thick steel. They're just twisted up like a pretzel.
One of the drop-off points is the Hugo New Schnitzer East processing plant in Jersey City. General Manager Bob Kellman says they're taking in about 3,000 tons a day.
There's 2 different types of material coming in. Some of it is kind of a mixed light iron material, a lot of building interiors, ductwork, paneling type material, metal paneling. And the balance is the original heavy beams that came off the World Trade Center site from, I believe, about September, right after the attack on the 11th to about the 19th of September.
The operation is working around the clock to handle up to 125 trucks and 2 barges a day. Once offloaded, the steel is cut up into smaller pieces using massive shears, so-called guillotines, and high-powered acetylene torches.
We're basically trying to cut it into segments. It's going to be manageable. But because the material, it's so thick and so heavy, they'll cut cross-section on top, then we'll flip the whole piece over and cut the bottom. The method is just to get it super hot and you're blowing air.
using fuel and oxygen to get it hot and molten. Then you blow air to actually blow the molten steel down below. And you start cutting it. It's like cutting like a knife. You have to get it to that critical melt point, and then you can keep blowing. It's the only way you can cut this. Only way.
The beams are cut into 2 to 3 foot blocks for easier transport and ultimately melting down.
The material is going anywhere from China and the balance of Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Taiwan, Singapore. It's going to the best available market at any given time.
For Kelman and his crew, the long hours and the nature of the work have taken their toll.
That's our skyline now. For 30 years, we knew it from this facility with the Twin Towers as part of the battery and, you know, the Statue of Liberty, and instead of the buildings being there, they're here. It's nuts.
Next, the city beneath the city.
Our 5 floors, over 70 feet of floor, compacted down to about 3 feet.
Unspeakable devastation. Pictures you haven't seen when MSNBC Investigates continues.
Removing all the wreckage from the 7 buildings that made up the World Trade Center is expected to take at least a year.
We're finishing up.
Ken Holden is the city's commissioner for design and construction.
We're pretty much on a year schedule, a year from September. Our goal is basically to get down to street level by the end of the year or by January. And then from January through September, we'll focus on the basement areas.
And much of that basement area below the towers, including the subway system, are filled with tons of debris. New York transit officials have determined that more than a mile of subway lines, including some stations, will have to be rebuilt.
This section of tunnel right under us here is fine, but as you head north, it's collapsed for most of the way through the plaza area there. Just north of that, you've got the 7 World Trade, which collapsed on our tunnel, so we've got another collapsed section up there.
The towers are actually 117 floors high, so 7 stories below the ground. You had the shopping centers, you had all the below-grade space, because a city within a city needs below-grade space for all the services that you have for such a city.
And this city beneath the city is where some of the most horrific damage took place.
This is one of the main entrances to get into the parking levels downstairs, and one of the main entrances for all the trucks and all the deliveries at the World Trade Center. Only after weeks and weeks of hard work, the construction workers finally cleared a path so we can get in there.
When police and firefighters were finally able to go through the 7 underground stories, they were met with unspeakable devastation.
Over there. Release response. You can see a burnt out shell basically, but there was a light bar on the roof there, patches, police insignia all over there, numbers on the car. Nothing's left.
Ironically, twisted and melted steel just a few feet from unbroken bottles and glassware.
What you're looking at across the way is the tower wall, completely filled with debris from the upper level floors. The actual tower columns are acting as almost shoring, holding back that wall of debris. It's probably the only thing keeping it off the path tracks.
Time stands still at the moment the South Tower collapsed. It crushed part of this commuter train 7 stories beneath the surface.
You see a few cars, fine. First three, I guess, were crushed. I know that everybody got evacuated from this path station and did get out when the plane first hit, before this happened.
Right there you got about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 floors, which were 14 foot apart, over 70 feet of floor, compacted down to about 3 feet.
As the rescue workers above dig deeper toward the subterranean wreckage, many more of the 3,000 missing are being accounted for.
When we come back, what will become of Ground Zero?
Something ought to be done there to commemorate the loss, but look to the future.
When MSNBC Investigates continues.
Terrorists, their victims, thousands. Their hatred of America, unyielding. And now MSNBC has discovered even more about these fugitives. Can a $25 million bounty and a global dragnet bring them to justice? Take a good look at these terrorists and learn what makes them the world's most wanted. An all-new MSNBC Investigates, tomorrow at 10 on MSNBC.
Before September 11th, there was only one other time in history when an aircraft hit a New York skyscraper. In 1945, a B-25 bomber, lost in the fog, slammed into the 78th and 79th floors of the Empire State Building. The 102-story queen of the New York City skyline absorbed the hit and suffered minimal damage. But that plane only weighed 10 tons. The World Trade Center towers were attacked with approximately 185 tons of aircraft, carrying 75 tons of jet fuel. Though the structures seemed to withstand the impact, the explosions and the subsequent heat from the burning jet fuel were beyond its limits. The nearly 2,000-degree temperature would eventually take its toll, weakening the infrastructure, and in less than 2 hours, reducing the Twin Towers to a memory.
Even with all of that, the buildings were able to last for an hour, almost 2 hours in one case. And that's in part because of the nature of the structural system. It's what we call redundant.
That redundancy did cause the portions above where the planes hit to stay up in one building about an hour, another building more than an hour and a half. And the good news is 15 to 20,000 people escaped from those buildings. 15 to 20,000 people escaped to those buildings. So I was delighted that they at least stayed up that long.
Though thousands did escape, an estimated 3,000 remained, driving the debate over what to do after the cleanup. By all estimates, the debris at Ground Zero will take at least a year to clear. And while the remains of the World Trade Center have become hallowed ground for New Yorkers and all Americans, it has also become the center of discussion over the future of the site.
We're going to rebuild. And we're not only going to rebuild, we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before.
New York is about skyscrapers. It's about a high
residential towers. That's the guts of the city. That's the essence of this city. And so I think something will be built there. Whether it's 110 stories, I'm building another Target.
To New Yorkers, tall buildings are essential to the landscape, and the drive to rebuild is seemingly fueled by a mix of necessity and pride.
If cities have a personality like you and I do, and I think they do have a personality, certainly New York does, it is not only the ability to welcome people from all over the world, but it's the ability to get off the mat and get up again and, in a way, not be afraid. And if you want a gracious, easy life, this never was a good place for you.
We have to rebuild. And they'll put a group together, and maybe I'll be part of it, I hope. But I know from my association that people all over the world are still playing in Shanghai and other places in China. They're still talking about buildings 1,500 feet high.
Before September 11th, 250,000 working people passed through the World Trade Center every day. Today, as the pile of rubble shrinks, the site has become a place of pilgrimage, where visitors come to witness the destruction and to mourn the nearly 3,000 souls still buried there.
I came here today to make us feel real. It's just so overwhelming. You hear it, but to see it is just so emotional, and right this moment I feel very sad.
Every time that I come down here, I come in and I grab one of the letters that I see from the kids that's got a return address on it. I usually grab it, I'll take it home, and I'll write a letter to the kids personally. It's just my way of giving recognition and saying thanks for the kids, sending in this stuff, and it touches me when I see it.
I came to New York just feeling like I had to serve. These people just need help. Even if I didn't do anything but stand here and cry with all of the other mourners and all the other, pilgrims that come to this wall, I just had to come and be here with them.
And in the wake of the tragedy of September 11th, there is a sense among those coming here that something should be built to replace the fallen towers.
Well, I think that it'd be great to have something there from the original structure that's a memorial, but they need to rebuild something there. Whether they put 2 towers back there or smaller ones. We got to recover and move on.
I believe they should rebuild on it and maybe have an area where they're going to honor those that have fallen, died. Just an area that so people never forget.
But never forget what? The horror of September 11th, or the memories of what the center was like in the days before the world changed? Perhaps the answer will be a little of both.
The joy that I used to see in people's faces when they sat in that plaza on a warm summer day and listened to music, if we could come back to that, we may never be able to do that. But something ought to be done there to commemorate the loss, but look to the future.
As the rescue workers peel away the layers of debris at Ground Zero, more and more of the victims of the attack are being found, and the shorter the unidentified list gets, offering the families of the victims hope for some sense of closure. That's our program. Thanks for watching. I'm John Siegel.
To subscribe to our MSNBC Primetime newsletter or for information on upcoming programs, go to prime.msnbc.com.